Hello, and one of the things I want to talk to you just about briefly is about approaching sort of the man on the street interview. The idea of just walking up to people and asking them questions. As a reporter, as a journalist, you have to be willing just to talk to anybody and ask them questions. Sometimes you might just be getting information, in which case that's different. But there's a difference. Like, I can't tell you how many times I got sent to some event, some festival, some art show, some play or theater production, something, and I had to just go ask people about, their experience, why they were there, what they liked, to give me information so I could create a story or write a story. And the key is there's sort of this, getting comfortable just being willing to walk up and talk to people. People will be nice. Don't think some people will be rude. Some people say no. People who say no usually just like no. You never know. Some people might be rude, but, you just kind of walk on. After you've walked up to 50 people in a week, walking up to people really is no big deal. It's I always kind of walked up, I always kind of shrugged a little bit, head held down, kind of like, hi, my name is, tried to make myself look kind of, defenseless. That way they didn't think I was, being a jerk or a brute. But I mean, I'm also I'm a very big person. So I would kind of try to, not come across as overpowering. But I just walk up, I'd introduce myself. I say, hi, my name is Tim McKenzie. I'm a reporter with such and such, and I'm working on a story about this. And I'm just going to see if I could ask you a couple questions. The key is always begin by introducing yourself and telling them you're with the media. Why? It's an ethical issue. You don't want to start talking to people and say, hey, what do you like about this? And then say, oh, okay, well, I was doing that as a reporter. Oh, I didn't know that. I wouldn't have answered the question, because they may have a reason. Or they may not want to talk to the press. Maybe, and the reasons could be varied. It may be that they've had a bad experience and they just don't want to talk to the media. That's fair. That's okay. It might be that, they're, it might be that, they just don't like talking to the media. It could be that they, had a bad experience. It could be other things like, they just found out that, their spouse has cancer or something. They just really don't want to be dealing with the media. They're just not wanting to talk about it. I mean, you just never know what situation people are in. There are other cases where you might talk to somebody and they might be they might be a victim of domestic assault, and you get information, you mention them, you use their photo, and suddenly they're they don't want people to know where they are or what their situation is. I've run into that several times in the newspaper business where people called up and said, you guys published my wedding announcement, and my ex-husband might see that, and he doesn't know where I live, and he might be able to find I've moved here from out of state, but if he Googled me and he found out on your website, it would be a problem. So, keeping that in mind is, not everybody wants to talk to you, but that doesn't mean they usually won't be rude about it. Just if they say no, just say okay and move on. The other thing I would do is immediately say, hey, can I get your name? Before we go on, and you might ask them a couple informational questions like, where are you from? If you're doing like a school thing, you might say, what year are you? What are you majoring in? Okay, those would be quick questions. It clearly, and when you get their name, say, can I get your spelling of your name? Always get the spelling. I should put that in here. Make them spell it. Why? Because the name, the accuracy of the name is important. We don't like to, it's rude not to have people's names right. We need to have their names spelled correctly, so always have them spell it. All of this has clearly introduced yourself and clearly gotten them to give it, and they're clearly giving consent to the conversation. Okay, so then we know right up front, ethically, everything. They know who we are. They know we're doing this. We know they're taking and writing down information. I wrote all this down in front of them. They know what they're saying is on the record, and then we don't have to worry about it. Different hesitation as far as dealing with hesitation about answering questions. With the man on the street, I'd say honor it with, if it was somebody who was a politician, a PR person, I would be willing to push them a little bit. That's their job, and there's a difference between being a person on the street. If your job is you're a PR person and you've just experienced some life-altering incident, you probably should have called in sick that day. No offense, and I'm sorry about your loss, and I would be nice about it, but you can't really use that as an excuse. It's your job. And the same thing with mine. I'm here, I'm doing my job, even if my life is difficult. I can't be like, I don't want to do my job today because life has been difficult. If I don't want to do my job, I need to call in, I need to tell my boss. I don't need to take it out on somebody doing theirs. So that's a little bit different, and I want to make sure that's clear. Honorary courses, not to be, and and then the last thing is interview sources who want to back out. And this is kind of just it has happened to me a few times where you talk to people and later they're like, oh, I'd rather you not use anything I just told you. And I can name two examples. One time I was like covering a union event for a group of Caterpillar workers who were meeting to discuss. It was retired Caterpillar workers about making them pay for health insurance. They were having a meeting about it, and at first I was told I could sit in on the meeting at the back. And then they told me I couldn't, and so I went and found the guy who told me I could, and he said, oh, well, ends up the TV station showed up, and if we let you sit in, they know who you are, and they'll get mad, and so, but we don't want the TV cameras. We don't care if you're here, we just don't want the TV cameras in here. And I said, but you said I could, and he said, well, you know what, why don't you go outside with the TV cameras, and then you can kind of sneak up back in or whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I think I kind of went in the back door and just stood there and kind of listened a little bit, but then they said, oh, no, you gotta, it was kind of just a mess. So anyway, so I was talking to people as they were leaving, and one guy talked to me, was very forthcoming, and I gave him my email address so he could send me some information. He was gonna was like the clear indication that they were right and the other was wrong. He's gonna go home and try to find this statement or something that he'd gotten from the company. I said, okay, well, here's the email address. And I went back and I wrote the story and I had it all together, and then he called me and he said, well, I can't find the information and I don't want you to use anything I told you because I just don't think you should use anything. And it's like, look, dude, we were on the record. I sat there and talked to you for 10 minutes while everybody was leaving the place, and you talked to me, and if I had known you weren't going to let me talk to you, I was clear about who I was. I was clear about the fact that this was on the record, and if I had known this wasn't on the record and that we weren't going to use it, then I wouldn't have sat there and talked to you for 10 minutes. So I'm sorry, it's on the record, you knew it. And so, occasionally people will back out. My thing is if you approach them the right way up front, then they really don't have an excuse not to let you use it afterwards. They're just, for whatever reason, you guys spook. Now, in that case, I don't remember what I did. I don't remember if I used his information or not, but I remember being very upset. The other time was I had gone to this military event, and these group of military people were returning from overseas, and they had suffered some pretty high casualties in their group. I wouldn't say high, but a group of like 100, it was, I don't know what it was, but it was about 100 military people. They had returned back, and they had about 5 people were seriously wounded or injured or killed. And so there was, it was just a local group with some pretty serious casualties. And so, we were going to do a story about how the rest of the group had returned home. And so I was out there, and I sat out there for like 2 hours waiting for this plane. I talked to some people in the crowd, kind of wandered around. And then the people got back, and they did a little ceremony. And then I had to interview people. And everybody, of course, they've been waiting for weeks for their family to come home. They hug, they cheer, it's all an exciting event. And then everybody leaves. And so I was sitting there trying to talk to some of these military people, and they're like, I immediately started off with my same spiel. My name's Tim McKenzie. I'm with the Journal-Star. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? And they would say, and their response would be, no, they can't do that because they were told that they weren't allowed to talk to the media. And so my issue is I was trying to get people, and I should have changed my approach. I should have just simply gone up to them and said, how's it feel to be home? Because that's all I really wanted was about how it felt to be home. And I wasn't doing it that way. And so I messed that up. And I don't remember what I got, but then this one lady who had talked to me about her boyfriend coming home came up to me and said, well, I don't want you to use anything because they're not supposed to talk to the media. And I was just kind of like, well, you knew you were on the record, and the same type of thing. Because the case is that people occasionally will. It's not a common thing for people to back out, but they will. And that's where, when you've clearly announced yourself, clearly asked for information, you can use it. Now, at the same time, I would typically handle and I would typically honor requests. But sometimes, if you've been up front, you were honest, you told them you were recording, you were writing down information, they knew the score. For them to come and tell you can't use it now, you weren't there talking to them because you wanted to be their friend. You were there talking to them because you wanted the information. And now they're kind of you just wasted critical time. You could have been talking to other people. And so that would be one thing to keep in mind. Okay? I hope all is well. And, I don't want you to also, I do want to finish with one last comment, which is, I don't want you to think that I'm sitting there being like, being rude about it. I'm just saying, the case is that sometimes when you're interviewing people, especially at events where there's busy and you only got like 5 minutes to talk to people, you can't waste it. So if you clearly identify yourself, get it on the record, everybody knows what's going on, it makes it, for somebody to back out, it becomes very tough. And that's part of why if you interview and you set it up right at the beginning, everybody knows where it's at. People usually are willing, and that's just the way it goes.